Welcome all the viewers out there to the Arraya Solutions Vodcast. As in previous topics, we've assembled a group of leading experts in their field, and for today's discussion, we're talking about our partners, Lacework, and how their approach to cybersecurity is helping disrupt the cyber world. As a reminder, I'm Chuck Kiessling, the Senior Director of Infrastructure Presales with Arraya, and also from Arraya, we have Scott Brion, the Director of Cybersecurity, and Mike Piekarski, a Cybersecurity Architect. And on the Lacework side, we have Tim Chase, who's a Field CTO, and Alain Lubin, a Channel Sales Engineer for the East Coast. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for inviting us.
So I'm going to start with the Lacework side, right? So you guys were founded back in 2014. One of the founders actually kind of intrigues me a bit, and I wanted to ask you about them, Vikram Kapoor, who's former Oracle, former Bromium. So my question is, how do you feel like leadership like that really shapes the overall Lacework strategy?
So I think it does a real great service to our company, because Vikram had this wonderful vision of looking at the security problem as a data problem. It really is our founding principle, and it really guides everything we do. There are, as you know, the polygraph, which is our proprietary technology. There are several patents around it. So it really guides us to how we're doing things, how we're operating within our cloud service partners, AWS, Azure, GCP. So it really helps us to focus, how we're always improving the platform, how we're working with our customers. So, yeah. Anything you wanted to add there, Tim?
No, I think that's it. I think that Vikram, with his background, kind of in the data world and in the SaaS world, I think that's what he really brings to our company. Obviously, he saw that there's a large need for security on the cloud side, right? The cloud market is growing exponentially every quarter. It seems like the record profits by all the cloud providers, right? So there's a huge need to be able to secure that data. And when you look at it slightly differently, he looked at it from a data problem. And so that's when you look at the back end and how we store our data and how we look at and use machine learning to kind of analyze all of your events for security events, that we really look at it a little bit differently, which is what Alan said. We look at it from a data problem that powers our polygraph.
Okay, so it's been mentioned twice, and I know I had a note to really ask you about it. So this is actually a pretty good time to kind of pull that thread, right? Polygraph. As part of your mission statement, it says powered by polygraph, and clearly that's not like, I don't power my flashlights with it. So what do you guys mean, right? Like, from the polygraph point of view, like, what is it? Why is that the core of what you do?
I'll start, and then Alan, you can add in maybe some technical stuff. But I think it's one of the ways that we differentiate ourselves from a cloud security platform. The polygraph is our machine learning that we use to really analyze all of the data that we pull in, right? So we pull in data from all of the audit logs, like CloudTrail. We pull in information from config. We have agents, and we pull all of this information together. And the polygraph is really what we use to be able to analyze and look the data and look for anomalous patterns that would lead to security events, right? And so if you were to dig in on the polygraph inside of our system, it really allows you to know what has happened on your machines and when, right? So you can see kind of a line of this. All of a sudden, this IP is connecting to this server, and then on this server, they spawned this process, which then in turn called these other machines, and you can really kind of look at what has happened. And it's not just a point in time sort of a solution to see this happened when, but the polygraph allows you to kind of go back over time and look at what has happened and what is normal activity versus what is not normal activity. And Alan, maybe you have some more information to talk about there.
No, absolutely. So our polygraph really differentiates us from the competition, because it allows us to, as Tim was just mentioning, allows us to go back in time, because every hour on the hour, that polygraph is being regenerated. And what are we comparing it to? Your own data. So you're getting truly insightful perspectives into what's taking place into your environment. So you can tell when someone is deprovisioning an EC2 instance and maybe using it for something else completely different, when that user is normally used to just maybe updating subnets in US West 2, as an example. So if they're deprovisioning an EC2 instance and they've never done that before, we're going to be able to alert you on that proactively. And again, we're doing this without any establishing rules, no establishing policies. So it's truly unique in the environment.
So essentially kind of a past and present behavioral analytic audit to create future recommendations and direction.
Absolutely. A lot of people, when they first see the polygraph, look at it as, wow, this really looks like a network map. But it's really a behavioral map of what's taking place in your environment.
Scott, Michael, either one of you, right? From your perspective, how do you feel like that's starting to play in for our customer base, especially given how tumultuous the security landscape has been?
Sure, like was said, polygraph definitely is a differentiator for Lacework, and that's one of the reasons, what we're bringing it to the table for our customer base. As customers are going through the digital transformation and moving their assets into the cloud, there are gaps emerging, known gaps, unknown gaps in the security programs. So one of the elements, that the polygraph brings to the table, like we just talked about, is that snapshot understanding of what happens, hour after hour, understanding the trajectory of a user's access and a user's influence on an IaaS environment. It could be catastrophic. If things are provisioned incorrectly or rights are misused, right, by administrators, as well as obviously the negative impacts of malicious activity, of intentional malicious activity. So, there's an element here that kind of transcends the cyber conversation, right, which is just the 85% of outages that are caused by mistakes. It gives some footing to supporting that ongoing issue in cloud environments, which I think is also a big problem as customers go through digital transformations, but also definitely covers that cyber element. So we know if we're dealing with an attacker or somebody that just maybe made a mistake with a subnet calculation.
And it's not something,
and if I could,
at that point, it's something, sorry, Tim. It's something where that polygraph will alert based on that severity within an hour. It's not something that's just sitting there for months on end, because we're looking at that anomalous behavior. So that's a great point.
And to kind of add to what you're saying, you mentioned, customers when they're starting to go to the cloud, and a couple of things that I've seen as I've taken companies to the cloud in the past or worked with companies that are going to the cloud is, number one, alert fatigue, right? So as they start going into the cloud, sometimes you start getting a lot of alerts. You don't know what they mean. You don't know if you should act on them, and that's where kind of our machine learning will help you as well, right? It's taking all of these alerts that you may have, dozens of them, if you were to use cloud native tools or other tools, and really condensing them down to what matters, and then ranking them from a critical, high, medium perspective, right? And then from there, our polygraph really kicks in and allows you to do the investigation, right? So that's the other part, that when you're moving to the cloud, sometimes doing the investigation can be problematic because there's several different ways you could do it, right? Maybe you kick everything over to your SIEM. Well, now you've got to find a way to log through, wade through terabytes of data from your CloudTrail, your flow logs, and all of that to make sense of it, right? Alternatively, you could try and use cloud native tools, and then now you're looking through maybe CloudTrail yourself and building some sort of a Elasticsearch dashboard, or you're trying to do something to make sense of it, right? Well, that's where Lacework and our machine learning and the polygraph really come in, is it helps you really do all of that from one place easily, right? We distill the alerts down to what is really important to you, and then we allow investigation easily by being able to look at snapshots over time and do the map to understand what happened and where.
So once all this data is generated and remediation takes place, And I'll kind of throw this over to Mike and Scott to start, right? So you guys would be the ones kind of dealing with seeing a lot of this data coming in, working with the customers to make sure that it's analyzed. What are the next steps for you after something like that?
Well, I mean, really, there's a lot of different use cases there, Chuck. So, I mean, if you're looking at incident response, trying to understand, forensically what might have happened in an event, versus, trying to ensure that something that happened that created an event doesn't happen again, right? So, I'll take the latter, right? So, learning from maybe an event that occurred, and using Lacework to understand the cascading elements of that event, right? And using that to understand where that could have been interrupted to maybe shorten an outage or catch something sooner. In that regard, there's a lot of elements that Lacework gives you some visibility into, right? We already kind of touched on that. Vulnerabilities in containers is a big thing as well. That you would use Lacework to get some visibility into, but beyond that, using the polygraph tool to kind of stay on that theme and not just jump around to features, you would, you really use that to understand what users did what when and with what privilege levels, right? And really backtrack using that polygraph information to understand what triggered the event. Okay.
So I want to throw out an odd question coming up, but
Mike's got something to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say before that, I want to hear from Mike. You've been too quiet, man. Come on.
All right, sorry. Waiting for a shot. What interests me about this polygraph concept was Tim's comment that you don't need a lot of rules or setup to kind of get it going. But to Chuck's question is, what do you do when you get those alerts? Once it is up, I assume there is a bit of massaging or false positive tuning, just like in a SIM environment. What I'm hearing from your description is one of the gaps that we see. I'm a very heavy SIM in my day-to-day. I work with a lot of SIM customers. A lot of SIMs have a user behavior analytics, but the main gap there is almost entirely they are linked against Active Directory or some sort of directory service. They don't have the ability to discover from multiple identity providers. There's always one point of truth. Usually that's Active Directory. So in the cloud world, that's not necessarily a thing, right? Especially in multi-cloud, you have different users, different roles, and you guys are linking on all of these different IDs and being able to give you that ability. So I say all of that to say where part of that initial response, I assume, could be a triage and a false positive tuning. So we could say, oh, you know what, this guy only does this every 3 months, but let's not hear about it unless it happens more frequently than that. And then the other piece is you don't need, can you talk to not needing a central identity provider as the point of truth? If a new identity exists across one of those cloud providers, you're able to do something with it, right?
So keep in mind, and that's a very interesting point there. So keep in mind that with our platform, you're going to get all of that information. But our unsupervised machine learning is going to categorize those severities. So again, we're looking at those behaviors. So what we're looking to do is to reduce that noise, right? So one of our key use cases with the platform is as a SIM enhancer. So we are going to send those criticals and highs, or what information you're looking to get into that SIM in a more relevant manner, so that you're actually utilizing your SIM for what you actually bought your SIM for, as opposed to going through these swaths of information and data, or utilizing some unwieldy tools within some of those SIMs, or maybe third-party tools. We're actually helping you to get better understanding and insight into that data.
Right, and I
we
think
configure those channels and rules within our platform.
And to add to what he said, just to tag a little bit more, so, to use your example of false positives, right, in your question around that. So, always keep in mind that we're looking at your usage over time, right? It's not some static rule set that if this is violated, flag this necessarily, right? So we do look to see what is normal. And when you hook up our tool, you won't be able to go in there and immediately see like the polygraph and the data, right? It takes some time to generate because it has to know what is normal and what is not. So you won't get your first polygraph like for the first hour or so until you're in there. And for your use case that you said something along the lines of a user doing something every 3 months, that likely, depending on what they're doing, right, it might not recognize that as usual activity. Once every 3 months is not very often, right? So it may flag that, and you may say, oh, I'm okay with that, right? So I think no tool is 100% false positive free, and anybody who tells you that's probably not being truthful, right? But I think kind of we bring that amount down. So you would have the ability to go in there and maybe just deprioritize that severity, right? Maybe we flag that as a high and you're like, no, that's expected, but I'm going to bring that down to a low because I do still want to know about that happening, right? I don't completely want to take that off. And then as far as like the central identity provider, with especially like in the AWS world, right? So anything that we do, I would say that the source of truth in there is going to be your IAM, right? So we do pull everything from the CloudTrail. And the CloudTrail always logs the the user and the role and things like that are causing it to do it. So that would be the source of truth from that perspective, right? And so whether that's tied on the back end to Okta or whatever you may have, however you have your cloud setup, we wouldn't necessarily see, but that would be the particular source of truth. And then, like you said, you work day in and day out in the SIEM. And Alan mentioned this, we basically kind of are the way that we suggest it and the way that we that I used to do this as well before I even came to Lacework is, use Lacework to filter out all the stuff and then just send it to the SIEM, because you have to know that from a SIEM perspective, you are sorting through gigabytes and terabytes of data trying to make sense of it, right? And so you really only want to be alerted on the things that matter to be able to do your correlation, right? So do that on the Lacework side, and then forward to your SIEM anything that's important. So hopefully that answered, I think, a couple of your questions.
Yeah, great. I just wanted to say, yeah, that part about the SIEM that you both kind of mentioned on, like the SIEM enhancement. One of the conversations we constantly have with clients. I mean, SIEMs are typically licensed by the number of events coming to them or the amount of data being stored in them. So being able to process that data and not have to write rules on your own or plug it into what's in the SIEM, it makes the SIEM analyst, the engineers, the people paying the bills, it makes everybody's life easier. So it's nice to have some intelligence before the intelligence, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And the way that I always say it, and the way that I always look at it is, the SIEMs are good at what SIEMs are good at, right? The building the rules, the correlation, the storing of data. Let Lacework do what Lacework is good at, which is analyzing cloud events, right? Like we spend day in and day out inside of the cloud, the multiple providers. We know a lot of the rules that should be in place for the different services, right? And when you get into some of the SIEMs, that's not their strong suit, right? And so you have to build these rules, or they have to maintain them themselves, and you have to download the packs to get them implemented. Just let us do what we do best, which is manage the cloud security, and then let SIEMs do what they do best, which is the correlation and the log aggregation.
Alan, you look like you have some thoughts there.
Oh, I think we actually covered it in the latter part of the discussion there. So I think we've covered those pieces there. Our platform is really going to be that SIEM enhancer, as we've mentioned. We're reducing that time for analysis for that SOC team. We're truly ideal for companies who are focused on building applications and may not have security at the forefront of their mind. So our platform really helps them quite a bit to get up and running.
No, I was going to say one of the things on that note, just from talking about one of the differentiators too with Lacework, how you do you look at container vulnerabilities, right, and some of the capabilities there. think it's worth maybe just touching on that for a minute, on why the way you look at vulnerabilities is different than your standard vulnerability management solutions, and specifically why it's unique to a cloud.
Great question. Chuck, did you have something you wanted to add there, or?
Well, I was gonna make an initial observation, which I think that becomes a perfect segue into it. So I'll throw this out and then kind of shift back into that, because one of the areas that I'm seeing through this conversation, there are certain aspects of technology that, until Skynet takes over, are always going to require a specific set of human eyes, right? Legal hold analysis being one of them, right? But there are organizations that are working on trying to deepen things like that. From what I'm hearing, Lacework and the way that Lacework is creating this disruption is ultimately around proactivity, trying to be more proactive to the things that are coming in and reducing, as I think multiple of you have stated, the noise that comes in from these areas, to create more actionable intelligence in a shorter time, which in the cyber world becomes proactive.
That's a great point. So with our platform, again, observability with context, right? So part of that is, as we're talking about our container workflow, so going to be agent-based, we're looking at vulnerability discovery. And we do that in two ways. We're going to look at it build time as well as runtime. Most tools are going to be looking at it at build time. So that means, as we talked about a little bit earlier, if you're utilizing a CI/CD tool like Jenkins, Circle CI, Azure DevOps, you can build us, into your early parts of your development, shift left, right? So as you're building this out, you're building this pipeline, as you're running that pre-flight check to say, hey, we brought in this container that has this really interesting Nginx code, from this, foreign external repository, but then you start running that scan before you put it into production, we're going to stop that run when we find that vulnerability. We're going to proactively alert you on that to say, hey, we have this vulnerability. We're also going to provide, spoiler alert, we're going to provide that CVSS score, that CVE around it, and we're also going to provide you that remediation path on the agent side. So you have this completely holistic viewpoint here, and to give you really good insight into what's taking place, what's our next path forward from here. So this really helps developers, especially if you're in an environment where you're running hundreds, maybe thousands of nodes. To be able to have a tool that automates this process, huge time savings, big game changer there.
And to even add on that a little bit, I think part of the whole shift left, obviously adding it into your Jenkins pipeline, but one of the things that we also do is not just focus on the system libraries, right, which a lot of people do, like the kernel version and the things like that. But in one of our more recent releases, we also do the application libraries as well, right? So if you're running a Java app, right, and so maybe we're scanning a container that is, a Tomcat server or something, and you've got your jars on there, then we will scan those as well to make sure that those libraries are not vulnerable because they're outdated. So not only do we do the core operating system components, but we do the application as well. And I think like a couple of things. So you mentioned proactivity. So Alan did a job of kind of drawing out the whole shift left perspective, which is where, from the build process, you can stop the container build, right, and make sure that it doesn't get deployed. I think the flip side of that, when you talk about DevSecOps, is the notification piece, right? So let's say something happens in your cloud world, then we also have the mechanisms to build in notifications. So whether that's some sort of a Slack integration or something like that, so that if a cloud security vulnerability is found, you get that notification, right? It doesn't just sit there and wait for it to be seen by someone who looks at your tool, or eventually by the SOC analyst maybe that is doing his review, like you can have those instant notifications turned on to various tools depending on what you use. We have several integrations that are built in.
So, there are a lot of integrations, right? A lot of, I think it's a very proactive tool. It ties into a lot of things. I think it definitely fills the gap. So, earlier this year, you guys announced expansions into EMEA and APAC in June, I think it was. Prior to that, the announcement for the continued explosive growth. You expanded the leadership team back in February. Mike Staggers, the CFO, all this year and all after a $525 million round of fundraising. What do you feel like are driving factors that led to the confidence of that kind of round, and is contributing to your continued growth? I mean, do you feel like it is just overall strategy? Do you feel like there are specific areas? I'm curious of your thoughts.
So I'll lead off with that one. I've been with Lacework, happy to say, almost a year now. So I was here when we were about 170 employees. We're over 630 now. So with that explosive growth has come astounding execution. Our go-to-market team is laser focused on that execution, led by Andy Byron. Now, as you've mentioned, that because of that explosive growth, that does require some changes to how we're structured. So we've brought in incredible people like Mike Steiger. We now have a co-CEO team right now with Hat and Jay Parikh, who are both top-notch. Can't say enough about them. We have Amy Kronk as our communications director. Just top to bottom, heavy hitters from top to bottom. So great team, great execution, but it's not stopping here. We still have, a lot of opportunities to improve, as does any company. But every quarter, we're beating our previous numbers, which is pretty amazing. So the credit definitely to the entire company and the team and our continued expansion, and we're not slowing down.
So I'm a little bit newer than Alan is. So I have been here almost 2 months now. But the reason that I came here, and I think one of the reasons that we're seeing these numbers is obviously there's the easy answer, which is the cloud growth is through the roof, right? And so people have to secure it, and they're looking for ways to do that. And so as the cloud market grows, to some extent we will. But why are we killing the numbers? To me, the reason I came here is because I feel like there's no other product on the market that does what we do the way that we do it as well as we do it, right? So, we've touched on some of our features, here and there, but when you really look at it, like you can divide up what Lacework does into 4 different features, right? So the cloud security posture management, the CSPM, looking through to see that you're not doing anything silly, like having your S3 buckets open to the world, right? Doing the user analysis to see if you have any users or system IDs that are doing things that aren't expected. That's the second one, right? Your container security. We talked about that. That's the third thing. And then fourth is the vulnerability, right? So we do all of those things. And I don't think there's another tool on the market that does all of those things natively built from the ground up well, right? And so I think that's why you're seeing it. It's because people want simplicity. They want one tool set to do it all. And they want ways to do it easily. I mean, the cloud security market, if you've looked at the job market, the job board, or tried to hire anybody recently, it is near impossible to hire a cloud security architect or anything, right? Like it is literally zero unemployment in the cloud security market right now. So anything that people can do to make cloud security easier without having to throw people at it, I think that's why you're seeing the explosive growth.
Also, keep in mind that we did just come off an incredible global event. I don't think it needs to get named, right?
Yes.
So with that, with people working at home, people are seeing that need. Wow, we really do need to secure our space in a way that's not going to be intrusive, that's not going to have an extended ingestion period over months, over weeks. And it's pretty well automated. So we're tailor-made for this environment, and going forward. We're definitely built for the future.
It's kind of funny that you would point out one specific item, and I'm going to pull on the thread a little bit and take us down something that is near and dear to my heart. Mergers and acquisitions, right? So Arraya has a very extensive acquisition framework that we have built. We do M&As all the time. I think we have like 5 going on right now. And kind of exactly what you said, it had required us to essentially restructure our M&A, because it's no longer we're going to pick up this box and we're going to stick it in this other box. We had to essentially break that down into 3 categories. There was the data, identity, and devices, and all of that is data. Even though they are in separate categories, the reality is there is identity data, there is device data, and there is data. So the fact that when you talk about the fact that Lacework treats everything like it's a data problem, is that why you have a specific call out to M&A in regards to the things that you focus on?
I think so. I can speak as someone who's done several M&As over the years myself. When I was whether it was when I was CISO at HealthStream or at Nielsen running their cloud security and application security group, right? One of the hardest things to do is to analyze the security risk of the company that is being merged or acquired, right? So obviously they're going to come in and they're going to have their best face on and tell you that they know what they have, that everything is perfect and great, right? But as security folks, we're probably somewhat jaded, and if you're not, then you haven't been in security long enough, probably, right? So we're gonna want to validate that, and right. So I think that's why that is one of our the way that we position ourselves is because our tool can be deployed in minutes, right? And then you'll have a polygraph in the matter of an hour or 2, and you can pretty easily, just by looking through the CloudTrail logs, just look and see, does this company have an idea of what inventory they actually have, what services they're using, and are they taking care of their security posture? Are they looking at their IAM rules appropriately? Are they looking at their bucket security? Just so on and so forth, right? And so you could go on, and that's why I think it's, from a M&A perspective, I think it's a great tool, because it allows it gives data to the people who are analyzing the risk of the M&A to say, here's what their cloud security looks like from our perspective. And you can put that along with any other pen test that may be done on the app side, and so on and so forth, right?
So Scott and Mike, I'm kind of pulling on that a little bit, right? M&As have grown significantly, right? The landscape has just exploded. There are different areas that, from a divestiture and a merger perspective are coming into play. What kind of critical areas have you seen on, the partner side that you feel like tie directly into something like this? What kind of data platforms, functions that are being performed, issues that customers are seeing?
Well, I mean, kind of like you touched on, Chuck, it's changed, right? From, hey, we're moving this box from this rack to this rack in a colo, and changing the DNS names on the the domains that and migrating mailboxes. Now there's a lot of assets that exist only digitally in the cloud that are part of an acquisition, and quite frankly, there isn't a real good framework currently to assess the risk, the operational risk of those assets. So in the context of this conversation, Lacework would be a tool that we definitely would position to provide deeper visibility in a pre-acquisition type of assessment potentially, or also, as a supporting tool during migration and integration, to make sure that the personnel that are part of the acquisition are appropriately assigned the right roles, that the roles are being used appropriately, and for that matter, a lot of times you see what's it called? I was going to say just-in-time provisioning, but that's not the right term I'm looking for. Discretionary access control versus role-based access control being a key element to an acquisition, where the new management wants to be notified and asked every time a user might need access to a particular critical asset during the acquisition period, the migration period. That's something that, with the way Lacework can identify the user roles inside of the IaaS environments, we really support that need. So it's my long-winded answer. I hope that covers the basis.
No, I think that was a good answer. What about you, Mike?
I think I'll go even higher level. What I laughed when Tim said the thing about it. If you're not jaded, you haven't been in security enough. The one thing, call me jaded, but the one thing most organizations don't have, a mature asset management program of any kind. So,
100%.
You can't cure what you can't see.
Yeah. Take M&A off the table. This is valuable to everybody because it doesn't matter large, small. You're trying to sell, you're getting bought. It doesn't matter. You're just launching. There's always some guy, some girl somewhere that has a lab that nobody knows about, or we started testing this product and it's been running for 4 years and that happens all the time. So, even when there is an asset management program, it's usually prone to human error, right? And so there's always things that fall through the gaps. So what I'm hearing is a great story around the ability to discover not only identity data, but information about what assets and what they are doing, what they are actually doing. Because the other side of that is that an asset could have been created, or a role could have been created to be provisioning web servers, or to be a web server, and now it's hosting some sort of it's an IRC server, and nobody realized that it's being used as command and control infrastructure this whole time.
Or to take even a step further, someone's utilizing or launching a key management service on AWS, and then randomly provisioning that for something else entirely, and no one would know about that. It's one of those items where if it's in a gray area, our platform is tailor-suited for ferreting that type of activity out.
Right. I think so. You made the point earlier that it gives information, but it also gives contextual information, and that's Correct. How you understand what actually is this thing doing and what is it being used for.
Yeah, because when we do provide that event, it is going to be in the form of a dossier that's going to give you your who, what, when, where, and why for that event. And again, we're doing this with our unsupervised machine learning. We're proactively providing this information so that you're saving time. You can actually see what is happening, and we're going to let you know who is doing it, where it's being launched from. So if it's an international attack or even domestic, wherever, we're going to let you know where that's coming from. So all this insight without having to use 3 or 4 disparate tools, you do this in the one platform.
Yeah, I think the other interesting element, and it came to mind as we're talking, I've been involved in M&As where the organization being acquired was being acquired for tech, and the tech that they were being acquired for really was around a service being delivered, right? So the back end of that tech wasn't really all that well known to the acquiring company until they were really deep into the acquisition plan, and that's when you found out that 2003 servers, utilizing what is a vulnerability, but they're utilizing it as a feature, are a critical function to how you log into their service, right? This is a true story. This is about some years ago.
I could tell you're a little. I could tell that it was a little too close.
So in that example, right? There's a lot of times, and I'm sure again, anybody that's been involved in acquisitions has seen where the perceived value of an organization is based on the way that service is being delivered to the customer base. but the operational fortitude of that service delivery model is not necessarily investigated as part of that valuation model, right? So Lacework can provide that insight into, is there actually a guy on the other end of a keyboard hitting a Y every time that customer makes a request? And is that guy getting $10 an hour? And is that why this looks like it works so well? Is there somebody writing custom emails versus having them automatically generated? Right, this happens a lot in these these acquisition elements. So just something came to mind as we were talking.
And it's about risk, right? That's kind of what you're getting at. Like I don't know that I've stopped M&As in any of the ones that I've done, right? I've raised some pretty significant issues in the past, right? And they don't stop, but it I want to say you're at least what you're getting into is one way of saying it, or the more politically correct way of saying it is you understand the risk level of what's being taken on, and maybe that factors into the cost of the M&A. Maybe it at least gives you some information that you have to fix before the M&A is complete, or at least lets you have an action plan after the M&A is complete, right? So it's a tool to help understand the overall risk of what you're doing when it comes to M&As.
Yeah, and just to carry on to that, also a lot of decisions come along with, well, what are we going to keep from what might we keep from the company we're acquiring and shed of our existing processes, and having that real visibility and insight to help give that, help you make that decision with eyes wide open can be a real benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're coming up to the top of the hour here, and I mean, I will tell you all, I know I don't usually get incredibly deep into like the cyber realm. I usually just say, Scott, I need help. But in this situation, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I mean, like for me, I start to nerd out a little bit on things like behavioral analytics, and so I know you all probably grasped that was an area that I could talk about pretty decent. But no, I mean, again, I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm hoping that we can schedule some time with you guys again to talk as you continue to grow and see where we are in 6 months.
I was going to make that suggestion because our platform is growing and expanding constantly. So we would love to have this conversation again in the near future, just to talk about some of the new quote unquote bells and whistles that we're putting out there.
Yeah, that
always happy to do it.
Yeah,
that demos really well. It's a great product to look at in a demo. We'd love to definitely show it to as many people as possible.
Yeah. I 100% will definitely get that scheduled. But like I said, it was a great conversation for me. And for those of you out there, thank you for stopping by, and make sure to take a look at all of our previous episodes, as well as the Arraya Insights Expert Q&A at arrayasolutions.com or on YouTube. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.